cannot do. You cannot cancel. This is a binomial, right? You cannot cross any part of this out and leave the rest of it. You cannot say, that's an x squared, that's an x squared, they're gone. You cannot say 5 goes into 10 twice and leave the rest of it here. When you do a binomial, you cancel all of it or you cancel none of it. You never, never, never cancel part of a binomial. If you do, it's always wrong. Yes?
So that's it was 10x squared minus 10x squared. You can't cancel it?
If it's not a binomial, it's fine. This is a binomial, and the same thing applies to a trinomial. If you got more than one term, if you got a plus or minus in the problem, it's all or it's nothing. You cannot cancel part of it. As I walked around and checked your homework, at least half of you I could see problems, and I only looked at like the first 4 or 5 problems, and I saw all kinds of places where you went 5, 10, 2, or you went x squared, or you went x squared, and x over there. And you left, that's what I saw. I mean, it wasn't necessarily in this problem, but between this problem, the first 3 or 4 problems, at least half of you crossed out parts of binomials. It's always wrong. What did I tell you to do? This is a monomial. There's no plus or minus. There's no addition or subtraction. What did I tell you to do with this? 2 different fractions with this on the bottom of both. You take this one here, 5x squared. Draw a line. You only take the first one and put 10x squared underneath it. Then you take the sign and keep it. Then you take 15x, the second one, and put it over 10x squared. You take this over 10x squared, keep the sign, you take the second term on top over the same 10x squared. This is your common denominator. I can write it this way, or I can write it this way. They're the same. Now, this. Is either one a binomial? Is this a binomial? No. I can cancel these because they're not binomials. They are both monomials. Now I can take 5 and 10, makes it 2, and the x squares cancel out. So this becomes 1 on top and 2 on the bottom. Minus. Over here, what goes into 15 and 10? 5. How many times? 3 and 2. This x cancels with one of these, which leaves me 1. Now you could, or you could have moved this to the top. I'm sorry, this is what you probably would have done. This is x to the 1, move this to the top, it's negative 2, so you end up with 3x, 1 minus 2 is a negative 1 over 2 on the bottom.
What the answer?
Now your answer could be this. This also could have been on the bottom. You could have written this as 3 over 2x. You could flip that back down so the negative's not there. They might have written it this way, they might have written it this way.
Which is correct?
I think either one. They're the same. It's like saying what's right, 1.5 or 1 and 1/2. It doesn't matter. They're the same. So one of these two is the answer. Well, they didn't write it either way. They wrote it a different way.
Which is the answer?
I would take one of these. Okay? This is what you do on this. You take this. If there's a monomial on the bottom, there's nothing being added or subtracted. You take it and put it on the bottom twice underneath each thing, and then you do each fraction by itself. And you don't have to actually factor this one. There's a way of doing it factoring, but nobody ever remembers it. Everybody gets all confused with it. I find this seems to be the way that people remember them better. Okay. Question on this problem. Okay? Question? Yeah. All right. 15. 15 says x squared 2x minus 8 over 2 minus x and 4 plus x. Can you factor the bottom? All right, now, these have binomials and trinomials, right? So you factor. You factor the top, you factor the bottom. Can you factor the bottom? No, it's already factored. There's no common factors. It's already in parentheses. There's no x squares. You're done factoring. But on the top, you can factor. It's a trinomial. How do you factor trinomials? Double parentheses. You cannot factor these two, which is what some of you did. So, oh, these got x in them, that one doesn't. I'll forget that. I'll just do these two. You can't do that. It's a trinomial. When you have a trinomial, 1, 2, 3 parts, right? That's a when you have a trinomial, you put 2 parentheses. Is there a common factor in all 3? No. So you put 2 parentheses. How do you get x squared? What's your first sign? What's your second sign? Negative. And now you need, this is a 1, so you simply need what 2 numbers give you 8 when you multiply. When you subtract them, you get 2. 4 and 2. That one's gone. We're going to use this in place of it. Now, what cancels? Well, there's x plus 4, and there's a 4 plus x, which are the same, right? Now, these are binomials, but the whole binomial is the same, right? So the binomial, this one cancels with this one. Are these two the same? No. The answer is no, but yes. You know what this is? This is 5, and this is a negative 5. They're the same, except they're backwards, and the sign is backwards. I'm saying, yeah, if there was a 5, if you have a 5 on top and a negative 5 on the bottom. And that's what this is. If these are exactly the same, except they're turned around, here's what happens. They cancel out, and you put a negative in front. If they're exactly the same, except one is backwards from the other. Now, if they're all pluses, it doesn't matter. They can cancel out. But if they're backwards and they have a minus in there, they cancel, but you have to put a minus in front. So what's left? The negative, and here everything cancels, right? So it's 1. And that's your answer. So you have to factor, cancel. Remember, if they're exactly the same, except they have a negative and they're the same, but they're backwards, then you cancel and put change the sign in front. If this was a negative, you change it to a positive. You change this sign. And then whatever's left is your answer. Question? Bob?
Question.
Yeah. 13?
Yeah.
So now, I'm going to write the problem and we'll make a couple changes, okay? You have the problem in front of you? What it actually looked like? The first part is r squared minus 5r plus 4 in parentheses, okay? The second part is parentheses with a negative 2, right? What does the negative tell me to do? Flip it to the bottom. So what you do, rather than do this, all right, here's what it says. Okay? But this negative says flip it to the bottom. So what we're going to do is draw a fraction line and put r minus 4 on the bottom. And now the negative is gone. What does the 2 tell me to do? Never mind, we'll just do it this way. You take this and bring it down here, okay? several of the problems you had that negative. It's one of the examples I showed you. I showed you an example of that yesterday, where you have the negative. You have a negative exponent, you just put it at the bottom. Okay, now, I'm going to get rid of this one. So now I have this. Now what does this 2 tell me to do? Yes, it says to square, but I don't want to square, because what am I trying to do? I'm trying to factor it, right? It means I have 2 of these, right? This simply means I have r minus 4 times another r minus 4. This is the same as this. I'm going to rewrite it so I got them separate. That one's gone. And now what do I do with this? I simply factor it. It's a trinomial. Is there a common factor? No. Is there something in here that's in here that's in here? No. There's no r over here, right? So there's no r common. There's no number over here, so there can't be a number common. There's nothing in all 3 of these. So there's no common factors, all I'm saying. So I go to, it's a trinomial, you go to 2 parentheses. And how do you factor this? Well, you just, I don't worry about the numbers. I do them in order. I really do. If I'm doing this, I do it in the same order every time. What do I do first? I get the r's. What do we do next? No.
Negative, positive.
Signs. What's my sign here?
Positive.
That one. It's negative. What's my sign here?
A negative.
It's also a negative. What sign? This is the first sign, right? What sign goes here?
A negative.
This sign, the second sign. This is the second sign. This one always goes here. What does this sign tell me?
That means that they have to be the same.
Well, if this is a plus, these 2 have to be the same. But this one's already a negative, so this one has to be a negative also. Time? Okay. Now, so they're both negative. Now, what gives me 4 when I multiply? When I add them, I get 5. 4 and 1. Which you've been trying to get me to do for several minutes. But, see, I do it in order. 1, I want to make sure the signs are right. I do them in order. I do it that order every time. I do not skip around. I don't worry about numbers. The numbers are the last thing I do after I do the letters and the signs. This is gone. What cancels? One of the R4s, right?
Why can't you cancel the other
It
one?
doesn't matter. This one cancels with one of them. I don't care which one cancels, because the other one's still the same, right? So what's left? R minus 1 on top.